Bonjour.
Ah,
Plaisir de vous rencontrer.
bienvenue.
Merci.
Sarah Henriet.
Oui, Sarah Henriet. Belle prononciation.
It's good to see you again.
Yes, for part
And
two.
I think I'm feeling the effect of the Sauvignon Blanc.
Already?
And
Already?
It's very nice.
I thought you could kill one bottle and be just fine.
I said that during the daytime I'm very weak.
Oh, I didn't realize
the
this was
alcoholic
daytime.
effect is very stronger than in nighttime.
Well, I am definitely pacing myself.
I think you are. You are a professional in that. Very much.
I have to be, otherwise I
Much better
can't
than
work
I
in
am.
this industry.
It's true. Exactly. Whereas I am just a drinker and enjoying my wine without pacing myself. So therefore, the effect is much greater than I imagined. Anyway, getting back to our discussion
Yes.
or our talk. Sarah, you have been in the States for how many years?
So, I was in the States for, let's see, a little more than 10 years. Right.
Was it intermediate? I mean, or was it one go? I mean,
It was almost one go. You know, I finished my middle school in Korea at a French school, and then I went back to France actually for my first year of high school. And then I loved English. I wanted to be fluent at it, and I thought the only way to do so is actually go to that country and learn it on site.
well, English is in the UK, not the
I
United
know, but as a
States.
European, being French is like, all right, let's go somewhere far away. I needed I just wanted to understand America better at
I
that
see.
point. I think that's what it was. And so I was in Maryland, really decided to stay. Very lucky to have gotten a scholarship to stay, otherwise I don't think my parents would have been able to afford it, private school. And so since then, I stayed in the States, went to university in DC, studied politics, and got my career
So you
there.
lived in Maryland.
And then DC,
And
Maryland
then-
was my first kind of start in the States.
And when you lived in DC, you lived in the dormitory of the university?
Yes,
I see. American University.
American University,
see.
yes.
Well, DC is not really a city where people reside. It's more of a
Right.
city where people work.
Right.
So in the nighttime, it's almost empty. There's nothing happening there.
Where were you?
Actually, I lived in Arlington, Virginia.
That's why it was empty.
Well, it's very, it's a bit
No, but yeah.
quiet place, Arlington.
Right.
When I was
Arlington
growing
is
up, it was
nice.
really quiet. This is a long time ago.
I won't ask you.
Yeah.
I won't ask
Anyway.
you. Right. No, but you're right. DC was pretty quiet. It's a hub for just people wanting to build their career, highly intelligent people, right, all gathered, and it's just pretty competitive too. But, what I loved about DC was very active, very young too. A lot of young professionals, very ambitious young professionals.
Lobbyists,
Lots of lobbyists.
think tanks,
Politicians,
of course.
Yeah.
Politicians, therefore, think tanks and lobbyists.
Yes.
So, which firm did you work for? Which group did you work for? Think tank or lobbyist?
So mostly think tank. I did get a pretty good job from a lobbying firm that I won't name now, but I declined it. But I think it was a really great way for me to. It's a different America too, you know, when you're in DC, and that's the America that I knew. Made some really good friends, built my career there, and then I think in DC, it was also my way of. I love the diplomatic feel of the city, and me loving wine, and it gave me a lot of opportunities for me to talk about wine, to talk to diplomats. Just so many different networking events that you can go to. It's such a privilege, to be a young professional in DC.
Why did you select majoring diplomacy and politics? Is it because you wanted to change the world through diplomacy and politics?
The grand mission.
Yes. Do you have an ambition to become a diplomat or a politician?
I wanted to. I wanted to. I originally wanted to. As a very young age, I wanted to be a diplomat.
I did too.
Yeah.
I did become a diplomat one time.
Okay, you're going to have to tell me more about that.
Some other time.
I did, and then that changed. I think after my university years, I just didn't. I think there's this kind of fantasy about what you want to do when at a younger age, right? And living in DC, definitely, I got to see more of what that entailed, but also what's actually physically and realistically possible. And that was a little further away from what I thought I could achieve or I could possibly achieve in the future. And all that bureaucracy, I just thought, this is, maybe it's not the best way for me at least, you know, to go about solving these issues that I'm passionate about. And so I kind of changed, I pivoted, right? Changed directions and I went into business.
I see. Well, in a way, that could be the best way. If you could become another Bill Gates, or if you have that kind of money, then you can start up a foundation and say, I'm going to put my fortune and do something to change the world.
I wish.
That would be the greatest.
I would be doing a lot of things, for sure.
It would have been nice if you did become a diplomat. Or do you still carry a French citizenship or a Korean citizenship?
Yes, I have a French citizenship. I used to have both, but I had to give one up.
Korea sort of shifts its policies now
like every
and then.
5 years,
yes.
right? Yeah. You just have to catch up with the law and make sure you're not in the dark hole.
Yes. And if you became a French diplomat specializing or in Korean affairs, then that would have been an interesting kind of.
It could have been an interesting path. You know what I noticed though, what I realized, and I may be wrong, but you know, this was my mindset. Yes, I'm French Korean, but when someone asks me, I usually say I'm a global citizen because I truly feel that I lived in China as well, and there are just so many different components within me, cultural components, that I don't want to just define myself as one or two nationalities even. And I think I'm way past that. And I think it would have been maybe quite difficult for me just to represent one country.
I see.
I think it would have been very awkward for me even. So yeah, in a way, I think business, it gives you more room to be yourself. I think I wanted to be able to personalize certain things that I wouldn't be able to had I taken the diplomacy route.
Right.
And have some goals that are more tangible.
That's true. Yes.
Let's achieve this. We don't need all this bureaucracy process to do it. Right?
And you are your own boss.
I am my own boss.
Which also entails
dangerous
responsibility.
Lots of them.
Responsibility.
Very stressful. Yes. Very stressful. Yes. That's something I've been really trying to figure out, especially lately with the team that I have. I have a great COO, I have a great marketing director, and all of a sudden here I am the CEO. All of a sudden I am responsible for this company, even if it's a small team, and it's been pretty stressful. You know, I'm trying to learn more about myself, because at the end of the day, self-awareness is key in terms of how you manage people around you. And that's been, I want to say, the greatest homework right now on my plate.
How true. So do you have time for your private life?
I'm trying to make more time for my private life.
Is it possible?
It's possible. I just have to make time for it.
Can you balance work and play?
Well, honestly, being in the wine industry helps with that because I always have great wines. at my disposal, and it's great to just open up a bottle when I work till late and still enjoy a great glass of wine, and I fully enjoy and cherish that moment. And so the lines can be blurry, but for me that time is work but also pleasure.
I see. But
yeah.
you truly love this.
I love it.
Wine. And so you
can't live without it.
You selected the right product.
A dangerous one if there's no control, but
I'm sure you control yourself. You have great self-control, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Now, working in Korea as a foreigner with a foreign citizenship, I understand that foreigners cannot even own a credit card.
Oh my God. It's such...
These restrictions.
Right.
What does it mean for you doing business in Korea?
Oh, it's so many issues, and not even issues that are deep and complex and hard to solve. You know, just basic admin stuff that you cannot do simply because you're a foreigner, and it makes me even more mad because at the same time I am very Korean. I'm like, oh. You know, I used to be Korean citizen, and of course now that I'm not, I have to go through all this process, and then I get to think about, okay, but the future is Korea needs to be more globalized.
Yes.
Korea is already globalized. They're already, even just within the boundaries of of Korea, so many more foreigners who speak very good Korean, a lot more mixed kids. What kind of future do we want for them, right? Next generation. And this is already, I think we're part of that process. And so that's how I try to just kind of comfort myself whenever I have these issues. You know, bank account, like credit card, like, you know, certain banks just say simply, no, sorry, you're a foreigner, you can't have a credit card. Like, I pay taxes, I have a business here, I have a team that I pay salary for. What do you mean I can't have a credit card? Are you kidding me? You know, that just doesn't make any sense. And so there's that side, and you know, all the tax form, right, in Korean 공인인증서. That's like a whole nightmare. For especially when your name cannot be matched with your phone number because your name is too long. My full name is Henriette Sarah Sugyang. You know, Sugyang is also part of my official name. My mom wanted to make sure my Korean name is part of my official full name, and so just so long sometimes it doesn't even go into the space, into the blank space, and it tells me, oh, sorry, your name cannot be recognized.
Now, you have a goal in terms of your business, I'm sure.
Yes.
And what you said that it sort of evolved in its own natural way. The business that you began sometimes went in directions that you did not perceive or planned.
Right.
It's sort of evolving in its own way. But still you have a goal. And what is that goal you want to reach in your business?
Ooh, the grand goal. I mean, I have many goals, you know, and short-term, long-term.
Let's say, for instance, the short-term goal.
Short-term goal, business-wise, right? Not personally, because I do have my personal goal through the business, but business-wise, we do want to become a platform where we're able to datify, because wine is so intangible. You know, you drink it, it's great. It's like food, you know. How do you know someone really likes this food? Like, based on what kind of criteria, right? So being able to really datify the process in which a consumer is willing to consume the specific beverage, and be able to predict and be able to actually form a solution that we can consult distributors about. It's like, hey, like that wine, it's because you promoted it like 200 days a year. That's why you were able to sell it. That's why consumers bought it. Doesn't necessarily mean that consumers liked it. Now that's we can't just make conclusions based on sales. And so be able to provide better information about the consumers, and hopefully also be able to consult producers. Now that's important because I think we're going in an era where smart production is needed. We can no longer mass produce. You know, we are reaching a limit. You know, so sustainability is a huge issue and point that we also want to care about and focus on. So how do we do smart production? We got to know what consumers want. We got to know that side of the demand to be able to produce smart. And that's what we want to do. Hence all the, you know, when I know I talked about, you know, datafying, you know, the wine business, but I think we absolutely need that in order to have a more wholesome, sustainable ecosystem.
I think that's a perfectly reasonable and necessary idea. The thing is that you're doing that datafying work only in Korea. But it should be global in order for that to really have an effect.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How can that, will you use your Korean example to kind of broaden that horizon globally?
Right, so Korea is actually great for beta, for a test to run because it's quite small. It's a small market. I think predictions can be done, I don't want to say easily, but we can pull out a few trends and patterns. And we have data from our partners that we can start working on. And through our application, the application is actually not just going to be in Korea, it's going to be worldwide. Anyone can use it. So we'll be able to gather data from just anyone in the world. Now after that, it's a question of, is this meaningful data or not? How do we filter it? How do we analyze it? Of course, that's a different step. But the collection of it is not just going to be in Korea. So that's why the business side, the supplier side is important, and that will be done via partnerships, starting with Korea. But the consumer side, that's something that's open, that we can gather starting next week when our beta comes out.
So you're going to use a application for that, collecting data of consumers for the Korean market. And once you do that, then you're going to use that example and you can extend that or to sell it or whatever to other markets worldwide?
We can make a solution out of that. So see how that applies to the whole supply chain distribution. And if we're able to provide insightful data, information for these different actors in the industry, then we can apply that to even other industries, countries. Not just wine. But we could obviously want to stick with wine first. But that's something that that's kind of the main goal right now.
Are you actually going to make that application? Or are you going to?
Yes, we are currently building it right now.
Wow.
So we are, it's a very different, this is not how I started Sudovi, you know, there have been a lot of changes and evolution.
This is becoming more technical.
Yes, absolutely, but I'm loving it. I love it because that's not how I viewed wine, it's a different perspective. But my role is important, of course, but the partners, the tech partners that we have are awesome. I love them. They've been doing such a great job in terms of how to put all the things that I have in my hand on the platform.
Really?
You know, and seeing that has been pretty amazing for me. You know, that this is possible. And so I'm learning a lot. I've been learning so much and really trying to broaden my knowledge and be more open-minded about.
So you're learning and you're growing at the same time, and
it's tough.
It's
Sometimes
tough.
I feel so stupid. How come I don't know that yet?
No, I just hope you have the CPU enough capability or the capacity. You don't overdo it. Upload.
I try to shut it down sometimes, but I have so much to learn.
Everyone has a lot to learn.
Right.
At my age, I sort of try to put things down. You know, put it down and let it go, and that's what I'm beginning to do. We're doing a lot of that. But your moment is putting everything in again, growing, and that's another period that needs to.
I'm a Google Drive.
Yeah.
Just upload everything and anything, and I just have to filter through.
Which is great. You need that process. I mean, it's all. You have to go through that cycle in life. Life is like that, I suppose. You have a time to grow, a time to and time for everything.
I think you're so right. I think this is really a phase. The phase that I'm in right now is one where I need to grow. And there are times where I forget about that, and either I get annoyed or I get very harsh on myself, you know, saying, how come you don't know this, Sarah? You're supposed to know this. You're the CEO. But truthfully, 90% of the things, it's the first time I'm doing it. It's the first time I'm trying it.
Absolutely.
But I have to sometimes act like I know what I'm doing. And but we all do that, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's exactly the process that I'm in right now.
Trying to be confident and trying to keep a stiffer lip, as the British say. Something like that. Anyway, obviously no one is able to travel since the COVID and all that. That makes us very sort of isolated and grounded in. But do you travel within Korea?
Yes.
Have you been to places that you particularly like, and when you travel, do you go to places and taste the local cuisine and food, and do you pair that with your wine or something like that?
See, I want to do that more. You know, if I had the money, well, some money, not like a millionaire or anything, but if I didn't have to worry about my daily operations, right, I would just rent a truck or like one of those like cute kind of cars, mini, exactly, and just go around Korea and film it. And just discover and explore all the different foods in different regions of Korea and paired with wine. I think that's what I would do. A project that I would love to do.
That would be an excellent chronicle kind of record that you can actually promote all over the world.
Right, I think it would be really great even for Koreans to see that
even for Koreans
Korea has such, you know, depth and width of, you know, Korean cuisine, of local cuisine that we don't know about. It's not just spicy, and it's not just about, you know, red pepper powder, right? There's so much more to it, and how do we ferment, right? The soy sauce, and there's so much. And so that's a project that I would really, really love to do. So I was just in Jeollado a few months ago. I loved it. I was in Yeosu. I want to go back. I think I need to go like once a month or once every 2 months, you know,
I think
just
you should.
discover and
Food is
bring my wines and of course I love locally made alcohol too. You know, I'm mostly wine, but I also love Korean traditional alcohol. And so by traveling, that's how you also get to know those local beverages. And
they have very different, diverse wines, like something made out of bamboo leaves.
Bamboo leaves.
Yes, something, not just, you know, hard liquor, but very different kinds of wines.
Right,
as
right.
well. Very different.
Right.
But we just don't know about them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need some better marketing and branding, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
Right, right.
So, in a way, F&B is your line of business, and you, although you say wine, but wine in itself is a product, but you can always use it as kind of a, it's a cultural thing. It's F&B is a cultural thing, so it has to go with what you always, I think, refer to as storytelling about your product. But if you can find those food cuisines that you can pair and then tell the story with that, because it's different, isn't it? Wine is not Korean, it's not local.
Right.
But you pair it with Korean traditional food. But if it goes well together, in kinds of tastes do not clash, but is very much goes well together, has that kind of balance between each other, then you can actually say that there is a marriage between two cultures. So what have you found in your business activities that you can promote as a good story to tell about the two marriage,
right,
different cultures?
And that is diplomacy, right? At the end of the day.
Exactly.
And food diplomacy, wine diplomacy, that's been going on for centuries. And for me, you know, and it's a personal one because I've seen my dad struggle in Korea with food, but also drinking heavily, shots, and you know, my dad just wasn't used to that, and it was very difficult for him to make friends here because of that. He just wasn't. He just didn't know how to do it, and he didn't really like the taste of it, of the soju either. You know, how do I? Now it's different, but you know, back in the 80s, that's difficult, right? It's already hard as a foreigner.
Yes.
And so for me, I've tried many different pairings, and I think it's been a series of success and failures. But a story that I would love to tell is, I think I talked about this in the past as well, but one is kimchi, because that is a staple dish of Korea. And the other one is 청국장, very fermented bean soup.
Love it.
Both can be very difficult at first. The access is just not as easy, right? It's an acquired taste, I believe, and so, but it's so Korean. That is a basic foundation of Korean food. And so for kimchi, you know, and obviously depending on which region it is, 전라도 kimchi will be stronger, of course, but you know, with a kimchi, what I love about kimchi is actually the cabbage is very, it's crispy, right? It's almost like it just kind of, you have fun, just that crunchy sound, and it kind of revives you. There's a revival with kimchi, you know, it's fermented, of course, higher acidity, and when you enjoy that kind of taste, and then for me what I found is it's the same kind of approach with apéro. So aperitif, right? You want that taste. You want something that keeps you bright, alive, but ready for more food, ready for next. So you're basically salivating, right? Your palate. And for me, kimchi was that. And so then I was like, okay, so let's match the two. So it was either Sauvignon Blanc, that's not too earthy, but earthy actually Sauvignon Blanc goes really well with kimchi. So kimchi has that soil taste too. It has that earthiness. So when you put the two together, it's an amazing pairing. It goes very well, easy to drink, easy to eat. It's actually not a shocking pairing at all. Really? It sounds shocking, but when you try it, you're surprised.
So Sauvignon Blanc and kimchi. Wow.
It's great. Wow. And I'm mostly talking about 막김치, right? Like something that's not too strong, or even, I mean, pogi kimchi is fine too, but nothing too, I mean, even strong. Sauvignon Blanc would have the right acidity to peek through, you know, all the spices of the kimchi. So that's a pairing that I love and I would love to share. 청국장 one, some Koreans may not like it, but for me it was more my perspective as a French person. What would French people like? Because French don't eat spicy, don't eat anything strong. They're very particular. Hence my father. And so I wanted to kind of bring out the nutty flavors of the bean, but also by cutting down the sharpness, right? The pungent, sharp smell of the bean. And we may like that as Koreans, but it's difficult to sell, right? Market it. So I love to pair it with a semi-sweet Riesling.
I see.
And I use the expression of, it's like flowers are growing out of the beans. It just gives such a floral you know, aroma to the fermented beans that it's like a bean garden all of a sudden. Wow. And it just becomes very pleasant. And the smell, you're not focused on the smell anymore. You're focused on that floral palette that you just got. And
that's a very attractive way of expressing that.
So those are the two that I, you know, would love to share today.
I love 청국장. That's one of my favorites.
My favorite. My favorite. Nothing can beat it.
You know, Korean cuisine is now becoming less formal because I think the best Korean food is home-cooked Korean food because 정성, you know, a lot of effort is involved, a lot of love is involved.
Got all the small plates,
yes,
the banchan,
yes.
right? Oh, so much work.
But nowadays, I mean, life is very hectic and very busy. You work, even so women work. There's no time to prepare the meal, the dishes. So everyone's going for the so-called the easy way out by delivery, by quick meals. And so the traditional food or the traditional way of eating Korean food is slowly but gradually disappearing. And those tradition is disappearing. And the real good taste that used to be fresh ingredients, very good for your health, actually, is no longer maintaining. It's now becoming more or less, everyone is either eating chimek or yashik or the deliveries. And everything is barbecue. Everything is samgyeopsal.
So much meat. Yes.
This is bad for the environment, it's bad for the health, but we're no longer, all that time and effort is no longer relevant anymore. People are not willing to put that effort into work. So how are you going to maintain that tradition? There are still people who are trying to guard and keep up the tradition
the
and keep up that, but it's a dying breed. And this is the sad story of what life is like, so-called the quick lane. Everything is pali and fast, which has had its effect or toll on what we call tradition. So have you, as a foreigner, in France, I'm sure that there's still a lot of tradition that is being maintained and kept. And this change, this enormous change that is taking place in Korea, how do you think that is going to affect Korean society and Korean values at the end of the day?
You know, I think those are some really great points. And being French, obviously in France, we are huge on knowing where a product is from, which we call it appellation. So regional craftsmanship and all that is very important, right? And we learned that at a really young age. When we say a cheese name, we're supposed to know where it's from, which region it's from, and it's part of our curriculum. That's what we learn at school too. We're very proud of made in France. And that's something, it's very much the opposite in Korea. We've been so open to, because we wanted to grow, we wanted to develop ourselves, right? We just accepted everything that was foreign and non-Korean. Now I think we hit a point where, oh wait, okay, now what's ours? What is Korean? And I think, you know, to stay positive, I think it's great that Koreans are very flexible or open-minded. They learn quickly. They're smart, right? And we are great at compromising too, right? At finding what's best of many different worlds, right? What's the center here? And now I think the movement has been, okay, what defines us, right? But millennials, what defines millennials? That is the next generation. And we definitely have a more globalized, right, next generation, and what they see of Korea may be different from what I think or from what you think. But at the end of the day, I think, especially when we see that with K-pop too, we're gonna have to have a strong identity to be able to build upon and come up with new brands or new images of this country. At the end of the day, it all goes back to what the foundation is. And foundation, no one can say no to the history that we had. No one can say no to the traditions that we had. We got to know the past to be able to build a better future. I know it sounds typical if I say this, but it's true. And I think Korea is still trying to find that, you know, and some of the stuff that we see is so mixed and weird sometimes. Like, what is that? I'm also trying to figure it out, but there are a lot of experiments. And experiments, to me, is having that open mind. And that's something I really want to celebrate, you know, in Korea. Not every country is able to do that. France is not able to do that, and sometimes it's like, oh my God, like, get out of your bubble. Look at the world, look at yourself. Sometimes I say that even to my French friends. Korea has the opposite problem. We need a balance. Again, balance. How do we find that balance? And for that, you know, we're gonna need different generations coming together too. I think there's a huge gap between generations in Korea, you know, given the very rapid economic development of the country. I think we really need platforms where we can talk to each other and understand each other.
Yes.
That's something that I've really seen hurting us.
Yes.
We're not here to fight. We're not here to criticize each other. No, we're here because of you. Thank you. However, this is kind of what we think the future should be. Don't criticize us because we want that either. And so there's been, I think, a really great gap of communication and understanding. And that's something I hope we can do better. You know?
Yes, gap of communication. That is certainly one of the main problems we face today, between generations, between sexes, between between haves and have-nots, or whatever. But now, as a political scientist or political major, what Koreans are very much immersed with this unification issue of the two Koreas. Although there is a fundamental problem that makes it impossible, almost impossible for this to happen, because the North Korea, the differences that we face, I mean, North Korea is a very close society, and you have this regime that is totally controlling the population, and they don't really know what's happening outside North Korea. Not only that, there's no toleration of anything that is different, or they disobey any kind of the orders that is directed by the regime. So the people have no free expression of their ways. And they have nuclear weapons. Nothing else, nuclear weapons. Now you have a divided South, where there is those who are pro-unification no matter what. We have to be in peace with North Korea, and unification no matter what. And then there is those who say, we can't trust the North. How can we have unification when there is so much difference, and that North has no intention of giving up their nuclear weapons, and there is no intention of actually engaging each other or opening up. So unless North Korea gives up their nuclear weapons and open up, no chance of unification. We can't trust them. A divided South Korea.
Right.
But still, people are hopeful for the better. But at the same time, it's not just about the peninsula, although the Koreans are only looking at the peninsula. Because now it's regional. China, Japan is involved, and Korea is stuck in the middle. The Korean peninsula is stuck in the middle. And then you have the US, of course. And then the rest of the world is sort of... As an outsider looking at Korea with affection, do you think there is a chance that Korea can actually have a peace process that will work? Do you think that you see reasonable possibilities of that actually happening? Although since Kim Dae-jung time, government, we have been trying that process and nothing has worked up till now.
I don't think it's a matter of do we want it or not. I think we have to have it in order to survive as a country. South Korea needs it in order to survive.
Is it? Or
even
or
a peace process.
Peaceful coexistence.
Yes, we need that. It's been happening anyway, right? We have been coexisting. Maybe not so peacefully at times, but we have been coexisting.
Yes.
We are already accepting the fact that these are two countries, two independent countries, linked with common traditions and culture, yes. However, we are two different entities, two different nations. We already know that.
Yes.
And that's okay, let's accept that. We have already accepted it.
You have.
So that's one. Two, you know, I think from a political perspective, I've seen, even in the past, when I would look at this issue, I always saw barriers, right? Blockades in order for this peace process to happen or for those two countries to exist peacefully. Now from a business perspective, now being in the business world, that's helped me also kind of letting it go in some ways because I was so, you know, passionate about the issue too. I think for the next generations in Korea, we do need some sort of, here I want to be careful about how I say unification. I don't think unification is just about two countries becoming one. I think that's another issue that's going to take time. It's definitely not for now. But we, market-wise, it'll be very helpful for the both of us, for both nations, to have a bigger market and bigger country where we can thrive, hopefully. We'll make mistakes, of course, but right now, I think a lot of Koreans also feel stuck in many ways, right? I think we've reached a certain level where we are like, okay, what's next? What's beyond? How do we take this to a bigger market that's not just really, outside the peninsula? Our neighbors right up there. And honestly, if the political situation gets solved, of course, I don't want to be naive. That needs to be solved first. But sometimes that comes last too, I want to say. Sometimes we need something else that can actually trigger the political situation to get lifted. But I won't get too much into that. However, I do think once that opportunity arises, which I believe will come sooner than we think, then we need to be ready. We need to be ready. We need to see it as an opportunity rather than a problem, because it's going to be difficult no matter what.
It is.
But I believe we need to keep that optimistic mind, though, and see it as an opportunity for the both of us. Not just for us, but for the both of us, because that is the future. I believe that needs to happen in the future.
Another issue is, as again, looking in from the outside kind of way, Korea, do you think Koreans are, I mean, now economically speaking, Korea has become a global player in a sense. Now, in terms of global issues, issues that are bigger than Korea, climate change, human rights. In some aspects, the Korean government, due to various reasons, has not really lived up to its responsibility in a sense. Some argue that. Does that give Korea a bad image as a global country, in the global context? Because small countries like Sweden or Norway, in terms of these global issues, they're in the forefront and advocate and also involve themselves and work very hard towards those issues, and are respected for that as a result. Whereas Korea, somewhat like Japan in the past, is reluctant to go beyond what is the interest of Korea. So how do you see that having an effect on Korea?
Those are tough questions. I think I'm going to need another glass. Thank you. No, this is interesting because I miss these conversations, you know.
Yes.
I used to have these daily. Now I don't. Now I don't. No one asks me those questions anymore.
Now you're working. You're working.
I know.
As a
Okay,
CEO.
and back to Washington D.C. I gotta like. You know, I think. I don't know if this would be a good response. However, this is what I think. I think, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, the world doesn't look at Korea and expect things, honestly. And maybe this is my harsh response. And I think the world still sees Korea as, oh yeah, that country that's divided. Oh yeah, that country that's still in Cold War. And it's kind of sad to say, but honestly, I think that's how the majority of the world sees Korea. And all of a sudden, you got K-pop. You got all these like girls and boys dancing on stage, 12 of them. And it's like, ooh, right? Oh, I like that music. Oh, I like that singer, blah, blah, blah. And it just becomes like a huge explosion. So there's a gap. Cold War country with great music or fun music and beautiful people on stage. And it's pretty extreme. But Korea has been extreme, right? I think we,
to say the least,
we continue going that route, and but that's just the way the country is, right? But expectation, I think the way you know, kind of interpreting your question to me is, what's expectation like from other countries? And that, I think, it is not so high. However, when something happens with North Korea, something happens with China or Japan, all of a sudden, Korea needs to say something. Korea needs to be in a position to say something smart. And that's hard too, right? I mean, it's a tough position. Because we're not always wanted. We're expected to say the right thing, but there are times that are very specific where we're supposed to come out of the cave and say something that's going to apparently solve everything or make at least our alliances feel better.
At least look good.
Look good. We gotta look good no matter what. Yeah. And man, like, how can we be ourselves like that? And that priority changes from government to government, right?
Yes.
But it's never perfect, of course. And I think it's just a tough position to be in. But one thing I like to say is that regardless of, you know, political spectrum or government, because we don't have that many in Korea, right? In France, we have many, so it's a little easier to talk about. I really hope going forward, Korea can overcome the issue of feeling victimized. There's this victim mentality that is still so deeply rooted in our culture that defines many of our policies and many of our even business policies, not just, you know, political. And when I see that, it's okay. I get it. I understand as a Korean. And I've had that affected my childhood too, my life, of course. You know, I think we all have that. Yet, okay, we need to get over it now. We need to be ourselves. So when I talked about, you know, our cultural foundation, and it's cool to have different breeds of this culture and coming up with different interpretations and being creative, all great. Let's continue doing that. However, we need to know who we are. And we need to be proud of who we are. We cannot no longer be defined by who colonized us, who made us feel weak, who made us feel small. No, we cannot. That's something we need to break that cycle. And I truly believe that with the right support of previous generations, I really believe the next generation can achieve that. Because we need to put them at a higher place to start. You know, we can no longer be kind of in chains because of our past, and that's something I really hope we can do, but the next generation can do.
I think this generation, I mean the millennial generation as you call it, is actually has less hang-ups than my generation or my father's generation, which actually experienced colonization, poverty, the war, all that hardship. But they made something out of that tragic situation. And But despite everything, I mean, life is much, I suppose, prosperous for this younger generation. But because their standard is so high, they still feel that they're suffering. They're also feeling that
that they got no choice now. That
it's
they're
not
stuck.
enough. Yes, it's not enough. They need to do more. They need more. So it's always that continuous, never-ending story. Nothing is enough.
Right.
It's always not enough.
Right.
Now, how to find the balance?
Do you think it's because for the previous generations, I think it was very clear getting out of poverty. So for the previous generations, I think the goal was very tangible and direct, getting out of poverty.
Yes.
Therefore, I must make money, no matter how many hours of work I put in, money, out of poverty, education for kids.
Yes.
Now, that goal is no longer the same. It's not just about getting out of poverty. It's how do I make myself happy? You know, how do I become happy? What kind of quality of life do I want? And the paradigm has completely shifted and the criteria are different. And so for that, it's almost intangible. It's no longer that, you know, it's not just that, okay, if I have A,
it's not simple.
I'm done, right? It's not that. So I think that's kind of the case for, not just for Korea, but for many, for just across the world. So in some ways, I think we should be pretty thankful that we can even think about these issues. But again, what's success then, right? Is it to have a house? Then yes, Korea can feel like there's no way we can have a house right now, so buy a house. The prices are crazy. But then how do you define success in other ways? And that can be really, I mean, that just depends on the person, of course. If I may just jump back into the whole startup ecosystem, you know, it is difficult, but having a startup in Korea, I think is what drives me too, is that I feel like I'm a part of a true societal change in Korea.
So
having a startup and being in that movement.
So are you being the water of life with a Chinese character water?
Right,
Su de vie.
Su de vie.
So you are becoming the water of life?
I don't know. Hopefully people see me as water and not, I don't know what else. But yeah, so to me, that's the meaning of having a startup in Korea. And yes, there are daily, it's hard. It's very difficult, but I'm hoping it'll go beyond just business, but also having started that in Korea. And of course, we'll expand, hopefully, you know, and we'll be able to reach all our goals business-wise. But to me personally, it's very meaningful to start it here in Korea.
Su de vie, I really like that sound and also the meaning. And I really hope that you become the water of life.
Thank you. I will take that grand mission with me today. Yes. Thank you.
It was an enjoyable conversation.
Yes. Thank you again for inviting me. This beautiful speakeasy interview.
And we're almost at the end of the bottle.
Great, great.
And end of the interview.
I've been drinking slowly.
Yeah, I've been drinking,
but
less slowly.